This week on the GameCritics.com podcast, Ludology for the Common Man. Dreams do come true, my friends. Episode 26 of the GameCritics.com podcast. Our last show before Thanksgiving. So many of you probably listening to this over Thanksgiving dinner, couched in the warm embrace of your family's love. I'm Tim Spaeth, I'm your host, and I'm joined by the usual folks, plus a very special guest. Let's say hello to them all now, starting with the owner and founder of GameCritics.com, Mr. Chi-Kong Liu.
Hey Tim, I got a early thanks already because I was able to get the marker out of my monitor that my son wrote all over on my screen.
Oh, jeez, that's brutal. Was it a Sharpie?
It was a Sharpie felt tip, but it came off, so I'm okay.
Oh man!
Just in time for the podcast.
Excellent. Also joining us, senior editor Brad Gallaway.
Hey guys, good to be here.
Brad, we wanted to, a little special thanks for you. Thanks for taking a break from Dragon Age to join us tonight.
It was hard, and I gotta say we do need to keep this short because those dwarves are not going to help themselves.
I was gonna say your Twitter reads like a Dragon Age live blog. It's getting a little much, I think. But
a little tedious. Okay, I'll dial it back.
Moving on, also joining us tonight, Game Critics editor and horror geek, Mr. Mike Bracken.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
And a pleasure to have you, sir. Well, I mentioned a special guest. Let me seg into our topic. This week we're talking about the academic side of games. Call it games studies, call it shiver ludology. Our guest this week is well versed in the topic. He is the lead game designer at the Singapore MIT Gambit Game Lab. It's Matthew Weiss. He joins us via Skype. Hello, Matt.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Are you on campus tonight? Are you somewhere in Boston? Where are you exactly?
Exactly. I am in Kendall Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts, on the third floor above the Legal Seafood restaurant right across the street from MIT, which is technically on campus.
I have been to the Legal Seafood restaurant, believe it or not.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, it's really nice, and anytime we're hungry, we can get chowder right below us. We just run down and grab it.
I'm on my way. Thanks for the invitation. I do want to know what a lead game designer at the Singapore MIT Gambit Game Lab does, and so many words there I don't understand. But before we get there, Matt, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to our last couple shows. We took a deep dive into the current state of game criticism. We tried to debunk many of the myths surrounding it, and we thought it would be an interesting companion piece to do the same for the academic side of things. We are not experts in that field. Indeed, when ludology comes up on this show, it is rarely in a positive light. But I'm not exactly sure we understand what it is your kind does, Matt. Is our fear and loathing misplaced, and that's why you're here tonight. So I think
Tim, let's give credit where credit's due. It was actually Matt's idea for the show.
Well, that's true. That is true.
I didn't put it in those terms exactly when I suggested this.
That's all about different perspectives.
But there was mention of the L word.
Indeed. And I think ultimately when we close out this show, I would like to be able to compare and contrast what it is we do as critics to what you do, Matt. And I would imagine a lot of people, like I said, your job description, lead game designer at the Singapore MIT Gambit Game Lab. What exactly does that mean? And I guess going back even further, how did you get to that point? Take us on a journey, a little quick biography.
Okay. Well, as you said, I'm the lead game designer for the Singapore MIT Gambit Game Lab. We can just call it Gambit from now on, because we all call it. We all call. I just want to be clear that that's the official title. Anyway, so I got this job here through knowing some friends of mine who set up the lab, who were students in the comparative media studies program when I was a graduate student at MIT in that program about 4 or 5 years ago. And what I do here now is I am sort of a design mentor for students. So the lab it's a production lab. We call it a research and development lab, and what it is basically a room and a series of rooms, kind of like a floor of a building on MIT campus, where we have a staff of researchers. Those are academics, people with PhDs, and in various fields. Like some of them are computer science, and some of them are humanities fields, and other people who are actually from the games industry. We have some people here who worked for THQ before coming here. We have some people who worked for Irrational and Looking Glass. One of the people who works with us worked on BioShock. And we basically, those are the two halves of Gambit. And what we try to do here is have all those people put their heads together and try to figure out ways to do interesting things with games and kind of push the medium forward using the resources that you would have at an institution like this. So we have students mainly here. And the reason it's a Singapore MIT Gambit Game Lab is that we're funded by Singapore, because what Singapore wants to do now is bolster their games industry. So they created this partnership with some groups within MIT to basically send the best and brightest students from various institutions in Singapore over to the United States, over to MIT once a year in the summer for 8 weeks. The people here who've worked in the games industry and the people here who've worked in academia all get together, and we mentor them on doing 8 different projects each summer. And the idea is that they take a game from initial concept to final polish in 8 weeks. And so we try to teach them about game design. We try to teach them about teamwork. We try to teach them basically just, how do you make a game? How do you make it polished? How do you work with other people to make a game? And at the same time, because we want to push the medium forward, we actually try to think of interesting ideas, which we call basically research topics here, or research questions to build each game around. And we try, it's not exclusively this, but a few of the examples I like to give, which are fairly easy to wrap your brain around, are we try to take technologies from other parts of MIT and get the games to somehow use those technologies or make use of those technologies. So these games are doing things, even though they're made by students, that you might not find in sort of a commercial game. One example is, I'm sorry, go. You can.
No, I was going to ask for an example of that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, one example is we made a game last year called Form, which is spelled with a PH, and that was made by a group of students who were using an algorithm that was developed by I forget exactly what the acronym stands for, but it's like Computer Science AI Lab. It's called CSAIL. It's another lab at MIT that does AI research, essentially, and they have nothing to do with video games, but they just figure out, they're basically trying to figure out how to make HAL at some point in the future. And one of the things that these people did was they made this algorithm that auto-rigs a skeleton. So normally if you're a 3D modeler and you have a skeleton, before it can accept animation data, you actually have to painstakingly connect all the limbs and actually, set the skeleton in the character and make sure that the elbow lines up with the elbow the way you drew it on the 3D model. So, the elbow doesn't end up in their shoulder or something and the animation looks all messed up. So normally that's a painstaking process, but they developed this algorithm that does it in like 5 seconds and does it automatically and is right about 95% of the time. And so that was pretty amazing. And then basically we made our students made a game. We gave the students that algorithm and told them, make a game that uses this as part of gameplay. And so they created a game where you're a little blob trying to get through a level, and the way you get through the level is to draw any shape you can think of. Like a screen comes up and you can basically draw any shape you can think of or use or create with a mouse, and then it will turn that into a 3D model and rig a skeleton on it in, I think, about 3 or 4 seconds. So basically, the effect is you draw something and instantly it starts walking and moving, and it's just something you made up about 3 seconds before.
Wow.
So and all these games are free, and you can download them. I mean, you can download this right now. It's on our website. And that's just one example. I mean, we have other stuff as well, but I like to give that example because it's easy to sort of see exactly what is unusual about it and exactly how it's doing something that maybe we could do at MIT that you couldn't do somewhere else.
So it's kind of like Scribblenauts with like more meaning.
Well, it's like Scribblenauts, except yeah, I mean, some people have compared it to Scribblenauts. I mean, it's not nearly as sort of developed as Scribblenauts because it only has a few levels. But I mean, it was pretty cool. We get some cool guests in here sometimes, and we got to show it to some guys from Pixar and some guys from Square came through here. It was really weird. It's like we were in here one day and somebody's like, "Oh my God, these guys from Pixar are here," and we were like, "What?" And then so we showed them the game and show them exactly how this thing works, and people tend to be fairly impressed by it because it's sort of like Scribblenauts, except I mean, you can create something that just looks like mush, or you can create something that looks like something. What's interesting about it is that it's different every time you do it. It's not recognizing what you tried to draw and then turning it into some preset thing that the designer thought of first. It's actually taking exactly what you drew and making it walk and making it animate, which to me is interesting because often what you draw is incredibly ugly, but that's actually what's really funny about it.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a lot of animated penises and stuff in that game?
Well, you can try. It just might decide that it might not look like a penis once it starts moving because it might decide that the elbow is in the left testicle and then the left testicle starts shooting up around, kind of trying to grab something when you try to turn a switch in the game. So it looks really weird. But it's pretty interesting.
It might look really normal.
Or it might look. It depends on how you imagine a giant testicle to behave. So, and in any case, you can find out yourself if you go to our website, and you can draw all the giant, any sort of genitalia you want, and the game has absolutely no prejudices.
Well, I know what I'm doing tomorrow.
Right now. I'm doing it now. Hold on, you guys.
And just to be clear, that's one game, and we've been going for about 3 summers at this point. So, like on the main page of our website, I don't see exactly how many we have here, but we have I think well over 15 games here. Some of them are better than others. Some of them fizzle. Some of them do really well, and yeah, that's basically what we do.
Regarding the professional game developers that you mentioned, are they sort of like doing it part-time, or are they on Gambit Labs full-time?
They're actually here full-time.
Okay, so they're like I see. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is actually their job. So we have we have an advisory board which of people that we have come in from time to time and talk. They talk to us about stuff that they'd like to see, or they think the games industry would like to see coming out of academia that they think would be interesting questions. We have the guy who a few people are on this. Clint Hawking is on our advisory board. Dennis Dyack is on our advisory board. He's actually he's very nice. He came in and gave a talk for us. Showed us Too Human before it was out.
Oh, all right.
Oh no,
fanboy.
Tim is in heaven now.
I'm starting to shake. I'm starting to tremble. Tell me secrets of Too Human. Let's spend the next hour on it.
Wait, so you're the one who likes Too Human, right?
I am, yeah.
Okay, the one. Well, there's somebody else. I like it too.
Oh,
I don't like it, but was still incredibly addicted to it despite all the problems.
Well, maybe I'm somewhere between Tim and Mike then, because I think it's messed up in a lot of ways, but I got to level 50, so what can I say?
There you go.
Tim, you gotta start a new podcast, man. The Too Human podcast. You got your partner now.
Oh, wonderful! In fact, we're going to start it right now. I want all the haters off and everyone else stay on. My goodness. So, Matt, are you? I mean, if you looked back on your life 10 years ago and could see that this was going to be your job, is this where you expected to be at this point in your life? Was this just a natural career path, or is this kind of a tangent?
Not exactly. I mean, it's kind of weird. It's not really a normal job to have what's essentially a production game creation oriented job inside academia. I mean, usually I think there's this idea that, well, if you're in academia, you're probably studying games, and if you're making games, you're in the industry. And I think that there's this bridge that we're trying to create now, where we're trying to create more games in academia, and we're trying to create academia as more of a, a direct stream into industry, but hopefully not just churning out coding monkeys and people who are just like we'd be disappointed in some way if our students, if in 10 years one of our students like, look, I did the water in the 12th Unreal game that's exactly like the second Unreal game, we'd be like, great, so what? But
Carnival Showtime, that's you guys, right?
Yes. Oh well, technically that was the portion of our lab that's actually in Singapore. We actually have a portion that's in Singapore as well. We kind of have two labs, but it's hard to explain. But yes, technically
right.
that was us. That was by students who made a game here the first summer. And if you're interested in the Carnival mythos, we have a game called Weep, WIIP, that was made the first summer. That actually the Carnival art style and everything comes from.
So can you talk a little bit about how you made the transition there from academia into retail space? And was that, like, it sounds like that's something you guys are planning on doing more and more, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that we've done here is we haven't exactly, so the goal is not to make money necessarily, but if we can make money and we can get the games out that way, that's great, and we pursue that when we can. Carnival was a game that there were some students who did this great game the first summer that we really liked a lot, and then they went back to Singapore and they actually got hired by the Singapore lab to actually make a game full time, and then that was Carnival. And that game, I think that I wasn't exactly involved in the process of how that game got pitched and everything, but I know that they made it with Xbox Live in mind. And it eventually got on Xbox Live, and so everything went to plan, I think, with that game, because that was their original plan for it.
So, like, who gets all the profit? Does it go back to the program?
Oh, the lab, yeah, the lab gets everything.
Okay.
So the idea is that everything goes back to the lab, and it's used for future funding. So what's interesting about it is that we have a 5-year grant at this point, which is up in I think 2 years from now. And at that point, we're under review by the Singapore government. We have to, at that point, we could get renewed. But
is there a cane in the contract if you guys don't fulfill your goals?
No, there's no caning necessarily. But oh no, it's fine because
that was inappropriate, G. I take offense.
No, I need to
Singapore are gonna be pissed.
So no, wait. They won't be, actually, even if you say things like that, and that's what's funny. Because so the joke about, I mean, we definitely joke about the Singapore's reputation in the world and for sort of authoritarian tendencies. And one of the games we did here actually was a game called Gumbeat, that was a game that was about what it's like to live in a police state. And a bunch of the Singapore students came over, and I actually had just seen the film. I was actually in charge of this project, and really I just wanted to see students grapple with the notion of political revolution and being in a police state in an interesting way that maybe hadn't been done before in a game. And it was sort of also inspired by playing Just Cause and being like, oh my God, this is crap. It's fun, but it's stupid. And then I was like, wouldn't it be interesting if a game took this very serious idea and actually did something more interesting with it? So I basically just gave that to him, and I was like, here, and we watched Pink Floyd's The Wall and like a few other things. And then they came up with this game that's about blowing gum. You're in a nameless country, and gum is outlawed. So the premise of the game is actually you have to blow gum to demonstrate that you're an individual, and then the more gum you blow, the more other people see you blowing gum, then they start blowing gum, then the police try to kill you, and then you have to actually lead this like gum-oriented revolution and replace the current government with a pro-gum government.
So let me guess, you had a gum blowing technology that you needed to make a game around.
No. That was actually, well, that's where the kind of what exactly constitutes a research question gets kind of muddy, because that project was I guess you could call that a more humanities-oriented project, and I don't know if this sounds pretentious, but that basically came from the fact that personally I was looking at I thought games that engaged with politics tend to not do them in a very interesting way, and so we basically gave this concept to the students and said, make a game where you're in a police state and you have to be a citizen in a police state, and how could you make that into an interesting game? And it was pretty wide open, and that they basically came up with this. I don't know if you'd call it serious, but it's what they came up with, and it's pretty fun. We've gotten some attention for a few of our games. Rosemary, which was a adventure game that was made actually during the year by MIT students only. That was reviewed on Destructoid. I mean, most of them don't make money, but some of them are known, some of them are totally unknown.
Matt, when you and your colleagues aren't advising students on game creation, are there any pure research endeavors that you're engaging in, something that I think most people would consider more traditionally academic?
I'm not exactly sure. Well, I suppose it depends on what you consider traditionally academic. I mean, the thing about Gambit is that we're actually technically under the Comparative Media Studies program, which is a humanities program at MIT. It's not a computer science program. It's not an engineering program. So when people think about research at MIT, what they probably think about is the stuff I was telling you about before, like the AI research, like the C-sale stuff.
Sure.
And what constitutes research in humanities itself can be kind of ambiguous sometimes. Some people do feminist readings of movies, and that's considered research. So
people should know you did write for Game Critics some time ago. How long ago did you write for the site?
It was several years ago at this point, I think. But it was.
I don't remember the exact. Yeah, it was pretty early on. I think in the first half decade.
I think so. Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
And for those who don't know, Matt wrote what I consider to be the very influential piece, Nerd Heroes, which still gets linked to and talked about every now and then, even to this day.
Yeah. That was I think that was the only feature I did.
But it was a good one.
And there were no bastard swords in it.
Right.
Very true. Very true.
So Matt, let's change gears. Would you consider yourself a ludologist?
No, I wouldn't.
The reason I asked the question, and I want to bring the other guys in on this, because we've talked about ludology as the L word many times, and it's gotten a very negative rap from those of us on this show, and I wonder if Chi, Brad, Mike, if you could chime in for a second, because I think we need to break down ludology, and Matt, I'm very interested in your perspective on it. Guys, why the negative perception of ludology? Let's make our stance known, and then we'll let Matt jump in.
Mike, you want to lead off?
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, when I said Chi, Brad, and Mike, I was really just saying Mike.
I knew when he said that some of us have a negative opinion on this show. It was basically me. So, what I have found interesting so far is the way that Matt has talked about what he's doing, and this is really different than my view or my previous experiences with people who talk about ludology, which is the L word that makes me run screaming from the room whenever it comes up. I actually find what you're doing at MIT very interesting, because it seems like it's actually just focused on games still. It's taking these sort of academic ideas and putting them into games, but letting games still be games. My experiences with people who talk about this topic tend to be on message boards or places of that nature, where it's always some kind of pissing contest who's smarter than everybody else, because we're talking about win states and all this technical academic jargon, and it's like there's a horror writer who said that the academicization of horror is a yawn fest, and I agree with that, and I think it also applies to games and some levels, at least as far as my experiences with it go. These people seem like they're always taking all the fun out of games, and that's what bugs me about it. And there's always that and I'm not an anti-academic, trust me, but there's always that thing where everything is so technical and it's all about showing how much smarter everybody is than the normal game player. So that's always been what's bugged me about it.
Yeah, I would kind of go along with what you said, Mike. I mean, most of my experience with ludology or people who profess the subject has been like you, like in interactions with people who it seems like their main agenda, is to prove that they are the biggest brain in the room. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing all the time, because I think that anytime you talk on message boards or when you get into a debate with somebody, I mean, that's kind of inevitably what it comes down to anyway. I mean, everybody wants to win whenever you start one of those threads or something. But the thing that kind of goes hand in hand with that and really kind of turning me off from the subject is that they don't really seem to be able to relate these ludological concepts or these buzzwords to things that people can understand. They have some inability to make it accessible. And
yes.
Like Mike, I'm not an anti-intellectual in any way, shape, or form. Like, I really think that games are deserving of study. We really need to put a lot more time and effort into kind of breaking them down and learning the inner workings of what makes them tick. I mean, you can't really create a masterpiece if you're working in the dark. But at the same time, I don't see very many people who are able to bridge the gap and really break it down. I mean, it's all well and good to know, these terms and these concepts that are really, kind of esoteric in a way. But if you're unable to bring those to the masses, I kind of fail to see really what the value is. I mean, if you're kind of just fobbing off by yourself in a room with 3 other people who talk and look just like you, it doesn't really do the rest of us any good,
My experience with ludology sort of stems from being the owner of Game Critics, and there's always been what I consider to be a very strong, a very small but very vocal minority of gamers that really care about elevating the discussion of games, right? That's something we all care about. But then there's a particular of that group of people. There's people that think that the sites like ours, particularly because we're called GameCritics.com, should be doing even more. And and of course, being the owner, I took a brunt of that criticism. And when the concept of ludology came out, it was sort of like this. It was sort of heralded as this. I don't know what you want to call it, like this. This Halo type deal, or not Messiah. Like,
it was like a banner. It was like everybody,
yeah.
If you were serious about games, you needed to get with this now. And if you weren't under this banner, then you were nobody, and we didn't want to talk to you.
Thank you, Brad. Perfect. Well said. And then overnight, like, all these sites with ludology sprung up, and that sort of that kind of irked me a little bit, and it also felt like it was a little bit of a disrespect to what we were trying to do as well. That sort of like what we. What we were doing didn't really matter. But at the end of the day, I just felt like, like you guys were saying, there wasn't enough application to reality involved. And, where are these sites now? I mean, I think a lot of them really didn't, they're gone. I mean, they were there for like one year, and it really picked up a lot of steam too, because I remember the New York Times did an article on these sites, and that was sort of like, that was a little bit annoying as well. A lot of people also were just flying. They were really just flying a banner. They weren't even like engaging in actual academia like Matt is doing here. You know what I mean? That was the other issue, I think. People just wanted, again, it was like a clique basically. They just wanted to believe in this idea of elevating the conversation of games so badly that they wanted to get on the bandwagon basically.
My problem, if you distill it down to its most basic essence, is not with the idea of looking at games academically. It's that the manner that academic game study is presented in now seems to be exclusionary, because it's not presented in a way that makes it accessible to gamers as a whole. So I hope that kind of clarifies where I'm coming from. It's not an issue with looking at games in that light. It's making it where, instead of steeping it in the language of peer journals and things like that, let's find people who, and I think you're one of them, who can take these concepts and then break them down to the point where they're still retain the information that you've taken from studying this stuff, but make it accessible to more people instead of hoarding it like it's some arcane knowledge that the masses aren't good enough to know.
Sure. No, I understand that. So I guess I guess the way I want to, one of the reasons why I want to have this conversation is that I sort of feel like somebody who has one foot in academia. Like I was saying, I'm not. It's like my job isn't to teach classes or write papers or anything. Although that is something that I have been doing just because I like it. I feel like I came to academia as a gamer originally, and there's definitely been times for me where I've just been like, oh God, what's going on here? These, some people are talking about games and they're sort of looking down on me as if, or maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but I don't know if it was my own insecurity. Maybe I felt like they were looking down on me because, I was like, oh, I remember like there was like a talk I went to, or somebody was talking about some game series. I don't remember what it was. And I went down to them after the talk and I was kind of like, oh, hey, have you played Final Fantasy? Because I thought it was totally relevant to what they were talking about. And this lady was just like, oh, yeah, well, that doesn't count because that's hypertext. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, who are you and what? Do you even know what I'm talking about? Do you even know what you're talking about? I was just like,
do you even play games, right?
Yeah. I was just like, you got to be kidding, So I think the reactions that you guys are talking about, those are totally reactions that I've had because, I feel like I was a gamer first before I ever got into any sort of academic community, and I still definitely have this feeling at times like there are things that make sense to me as a gamer that. It's almost sometimes I'm trying to convince other people like, oh no, this is really interesting, and it's almost like they're really skeptical about it, and I'm like, oh my God, do I have to justify this? That's crazy. But I guess I don't know. I mean, for me that's a cultural difference a lot of the time. Like some of these people who maybe at first to me felt like people who didn't know about games. Some of them actually are people who don't know anything about games. Let me make that very clear. But some of them are also people who have a different experience than me. Like the game studies community is actually very big and very international. And for example, you might run into somebody who doesn't know a bunch of 8-bit NES games because they grew up in Europe and they didn't actually have the 8-bit NES in Europe the way we had it here. They had the MSX. And, they might know about Castlevania when it was called Vampire Killer. And they might know that the nonlinear stuff that was in Symphony of the Night, in Symphony of the Night's level design, actually appeared in the first Castlevania game before it was on the NES. And Symphony of the Night was actually a throwback to that. Like, that's something I didn't know. So, I think that there's many different people who come at this from many different angles. And I think that, there's absolutely no community that's impervious to pretension. I mean, I think that you can, if somebody just decides that, they want to lord, jargon over people as a way to feel superior to them, people can do that. And you can't really stop them, but what you can do is ignore them, and you can try to focus on the people who don't do that. And I think that that's fair. But on the other hand, I do think that there is a certain level of jargon that can be useful. And I think that, in order to talk about something technically, I mean, Mike, you may be able to tell me something about this, but there are film terms that have entered into the common language that we use now.
Definitely.
That I mean, I don't know what a great example is, but I remember like the first time, and maybe this is too pretentious a term for you. I don't know. Some people have different ideas. I don't know if you ever used the term mise en scène. I mean, some people do.
I have, but it's one that you're always reluctant to pull out because it's the one that people spit on you for, basically. So.
Sure. But I mean, what does it mean? I mean, can you define it for people who don't know?
Well, actually, it's everything in front of the camera that goes into a film, the director's entire vision. But there's also a school of thought that calls it film criticism's grand undefined term as well, because there are about 300 different definitions for the term. So
sure, or like another good one is like auteur theory, right? I mean,
yes.
We talk about that, and most people don't spit on you when you say auteur theory.
No, they just roll their eyes instead. So the reaction isn't quite as bad.
Sure. So I mean, so sometimes this stuff sometimes having more technical words for something can be useful. I think it's a question of not being a jerk about it. It's one thing to say, hey, I have a word, I think it can help. Here's how I think it can help, so I'm going to try to use it. It's another thing to say, oh, why don't you know this word? You must be an idiot. And I think that there's a big difference between using the same language depending on the difference in attitude.
Well, Matt, let's start at the very beginning here. In terms of the word. I mean, what what is your perception of the word ludology? And
So,
your
okay.
program has clearly made a distinction in calling itself game studies. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So first of all, what's interesting about the term ludology to me is that this concept of ludology, the term itself, being a signifier or referring to the vast body of people studying games in academia all over the world is not something it's not something that any academic I have ever met thinks or believes. It's ludology within academia actually has a very different meaning, and it originally comes from a debate which people say. I mean, the debate itself. There's debate about the debate, and don't even get me started. It's crazy, but basically there was when game studies, and we tend to call it game studies, was starting up about 10 years ago. There was this. People would talk about what they called the ludology versus narratology debate, and basically what that was a fancy way of saying of talking about people who about one camp of people who think that stories should have no part of games, and another camp of people who say they should. And to me, that's, I mean, if you sort of like say it in that language, it doesn't sound so pretentious to me, because I think that you can find that same opinion in the mainstream game culture, right? I mean, you have some people who are like, story doesn't matter. I don't care what the graphics are. I don't care about what the story is. I just care about the gameplay. And then you have other people who are just kind of like, no, the story totally matters. If a game has a bad story, that makes the game bad. And other people are like, what are you talking about? It doesn't matter what the story is because it's a game. It's not a movie, all that kind of stuff. And I think those are conversations that you guys those types of discussions are things you're probably familiar with, even though you don't use those incredibly pretentious terms.
Yes, exactly.
But I guess my point, though, is like the underlying ideas behind the debate are not all that dissimilar. They were just going on in academia between different groups of people who sort of had these different camps of what they thought. And the way I saw them as a gamer coming into academia, I saw them as sort of academic jargon-filled versions of existing debates that were already in game culture. So in a sense, you can look at it and say, okay, that's pretentious, but you can also look at it and say, well, okay, these people are part of this particular group. They have a particular language, whatever. That's how they talk here, obviously. But really, they're talking about the same stuff. And that's kind of how I came to it. So anybody who's in game studies in academia, if you say ludology, they're probably not going to think you're talking about their job or this entire field. Probably what they think is that you are referring to this debate, or you're referring to the particular point of view that says games are nothing but rules and systems, and nothing else matters.
So did ludology get leaked somehow, and then a bunch of people sort of grabbed onto it? Is that what happened then?
Well, that's and this is what's interesting to me. So I don't know, and so all I know is that this is what ludology means to me. This is what it's meant to me for the last 10 years. And I don't use it that much myself, but when people mention it, usually they're referring to this debate, and usually they're referring to this difference of opinion over what the essence of games really are, associated with these particular terms. And then and then it's kind of like, and then I guess somebody writes something in the New York Times, and then it's kind of like, oh, and then other people are just like, oh, ludology, that must be what everybody's doing in academia, and then I'm just like, what, so so for me, like, and I think maybe the reason that some people think it refers to all of academia is that the people, I think, originally who were the ludologists in academia, of course, they thought that the way that they saw games was the entire field. Right, it's kind of like, obviously, if you're going to study games, it's studying games, and nothing else matters, not stories, not movies, not anything else. It's just games or games or games or games or games, and shut up. I don't care.
It's like they went public first in some ways, right?
Well, I don't know if it was planned that way, but somehow I think that some of the people who first used the term ludology in game studies were people who were sort of proposing it as the study of video games or actually games in general. And so I think maybe it may have been as simple as like some journalists saying, oh, there's all these people studying video games now all over the world. And, oh, I read this academic paper where this guy said, hey, the study of games is called ludology. And it may have been sort of, really what that paper was an argument for why that person wanted the whole field to be called ludology, not that it was called ludology, if that makes sense.
I feel bad for what is it, natology?
Narratology. So here's the thing.
That's like
here's the weird thing about this is like I don't even know what a lot of this stuff means. So and that's why I say I'm sort of like I'm also like 1 foot in academia for me, because I got there and I'm like, I like Final Fantasy, I like Metal Gear, and it's like, oh, narratologist. I'm like, what? So I'm just like, what is going on? What's narratology? Who are you people? So narratology itself is this whole other field of study, and it's not a field of study I'm actually very familiar with. So for somebody at some point thought that the people who like stories and games are narratologists. Why? I don't know. Somebody wrote that in a paper, and they're like, "Oh, you must be part of this other field." And I'm like, "What other field? I just played Final Fantasy VII. I want to write a paper about it. What do you want with me? What are you talking about? And then so that kind of the thing I'm describing is really me about 10 years ago when I was first coming to the field. And since then I've sort of figured out like, oh, okay, well, it's weird. It's like academia, it's its own place with its own history. And like in academia, if you say something, it's not like, oh, you must be in the tradition of X. And then there's like 1,000 years of history behind that. And it's like you're getting to a party that's been going on for the last 10,000 years or the last 3,000 years and began with, I don't know, Aristotle. And you're just like, Jesus, what's going on? So, I mean, you try to make sense of it. And some people, I think, just lord the fact that they know everybody at the party better than you. And some people are just like, hey, it's a party. Just have fun. And, we'll figure it out as we go. And I think that's a little bit more my attitude. I mean, it's good to know the people at the party, and it's good to hang out with them, and it's good to talk to them. But if you don't like somebody at the party, you don't have to talk to them. You can let them talk in their corner with their cocktails, and you can go over and talk to these other people. So I tend to hang out with the people at the party I find interesting and who I find useful for the kinds of stuff that I'm interested in, which is making new, interesting kinds of games, I guess.
Okay, let's circle back to the question I posed at the top of the show. What are the key differences between the academic approach and the critical approach? So let's pick a topic, a game, a genre, an event. Matt, as guest, I'll offer the choice to you. And let's each try to break it down and figure out where our approaches align and where they diverge. So Matt, I give the floor to you, sir.
There was a while ago where I submitted an abstract to a book that was like an academic collection of essays about horror games. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I like horror games, so I'll do that. And I got in, and basically I wanted to talk about how now, to use jargon, I hope it's not too bad. I wanted to talk about the name of the. So this book actually just came out. It's on Amazon. It's called Horror Video Games, and it was actually the basis for this conference that was in Montreal. And what I wrote about for my chapter was about this theory that Ian Bogost, who's a game studies guy, came up with. He called it procedural adaptation, which is the term he uses to describe how video games uniquely adapt other media. So, if you say like, oh, this game is based on GoldenEye, right? So the GoldenEye N64 game is based on the movie GoldenEye. Your question would be like, okay, so what exactly is it? How exactly is it adapting GoldenEye? Is it just the graphics, or is it actually taking something about what's happening in GoldenEye or the logics of the James Bond world and trying to recreate those as part of the gameplay? And Ian Bogost would basically argue that if a game is taking the logics of that world or something and trying to recreate it as part of the gameplay, it's trying to simulate it in some way rather than just slap the graphics on it. That would be an example of procedural adaptation, because for him, process is sort of the same thing as saying gameplay. So you can almost think of that like in a more sort of layman's term, it's kind of like saying gameplay adaptation, if that makes sense.
Okay, so let's take this example that you've got, Matt, and I do think it's a good one. So
Okay.
you have broken it down, which is great, but I think it needs to go even further.
Okay.
So can you actually get down to the nitty gritty? Like, give us like a specific game, a specific scene, a specific addition to a particular game, and really like paint the picture for us.
A better example, I guess, would be the Clock Tower series, which was the other thing I wrote about. You've played Clock Tower, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Give me nightmares, scarred for life.
So basically, one of the things I try to say is that and you saw Scream, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
in Scream they talk all about the rules for being in a slasher movie, right?
Yeah.
The
postmodernist slasher flick.
Sure. So and the idea is that the kids have all seen the movies, they all know the rules and everything. So really what I was trying to say is that those games, the mechanics of those games are really embodying what you see going on in those movies. And Jennifer, the character in the first game, it's all about running away from this guy, right? It's not about
Right. You're not supposed to fight him or
you're not supposed to fight him.
But if the game adheres to the rules, isn't that in essence a good adaptation then?
That's exactly my point. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
Clock Tower was a good one then.
For me it was. For me, Clock Tower understood that genre really well, and it really understood that genre as a system, right? As a series of rules that you could turn into bits of gameplay. So to me, that's a lot more interesting than a game where it's like, oh, it's based on Friday the 13th, but really you run around and you hit birds with knives, which is what you do in the NES game.
Yeah, rocks.
Yeah, I think we'd totally all agree that Friday the 13th is a pretty horrible, not only an adaptation, but I think a horrible game in general. But
I like Friday the 13th, the game.
Oh, it's bad. It was bad. I mean, you may like it, but you gotta say it's bad.
It's bad. Well, I don't know.
You gotta say it's
it's
bad.
hard. It's hard. I'll tell you that. Jason on the third day is a nightmare. I have never beaten him,
Well,
but I kind of like.
I think that's okay. We're not going to get into the Friday 13th discussion.
Matt, I wanted to ask Matt.
Sure.
Where does Resident Evil fall on the scale of how you measure?
Yeah,
this?
that's exactly what I was going to say. So, like, if Clock Tower is a good adaptation, meaning that it follows the horror movie rules, as in the people have to run away. You don't really directly fight the main bad guy. You can't really kill them. All those tropes that we kind of look for a certain type of horror movies. How is Resident Evil either a good or not good adaptation?
Oh, I thought Resident Evil 1, I remember what I wrote. I basically tried to break it down in terms of like, okay, well, I think that you can shoot zombies in the head in that game, but only sort of. What's really weird about the first Resident Evil is that it doesn't allow for body shooting. It's like you can't. It's really. I mean, in a sense, it's really strange to have a zombie game where you can't shoot zombies in the head on purpose. And it's really amazing to me that it took them like 10 years to actually let you actually aim for a zombie's head, since that's one of the main things about the zombie that's famous. And but what's interesting to me about Resident Evil 1 is that it does have this kind of weird system. I don't know if you played. Did you play the director's cut where you got this like special gun in the game where you could? It's like there was the custom not the custom magnum, like the custom handgun. It's like there was a chance that you would hit them in the head like every time.
Right.
Every time you shot them. So to me, that was actually pushing it more in the direction of it being a little bit more of an adaptation of those rules, because then the impression was that, okay, well, it feels sort of like my character's trying to hit them in the head and maybe failing, and every once in a while actually, pull off a headshot.
So it'd be kind of like David Warbeck at the end of The Beyond, where he knows that headshots kill all the zombies in that Fulci movie, yet he continues to shoot them in the gut over and over and over for some reason.
Well, yeah, and in Resident Evil, the game basically forces you to only shoot them in the gut over and over again.
Yeah, that's the most frustrating thing about that movie.
Well,
let's continue down this path a little bit, though, because I think you've raised something interesting. So now that so let's say you've done this paper. You've showed like a good comparison with Clock Tower because it follows the rules, and you've showed like a bad comparison with Resident Evil because it doesn't quite follow the rules. So my logical conclusion to this is like, why did you do that? Like, what was the point of that? Beyond simply studying whether or not they mirrored film, I mean, what was your ultimate goal? I mean, was it just simply to make these observations, or did you actually like apply that knowledge or see potential use for it in another way?
Well, I mean, I think the idea is to counteract a notion which to me seems to prevail in academia and also in what I would consider to be mainstream game culture and also culture of developers, which is, oh, that movie can't be made into a game. Or, oh, we can never make a movie based on, you're like, oh, well, why can't you make this kind of movie into a game? Or why can't we have more interesting adaptations of this particular property? It's like, oh, I wanted to make a James Bond game. Oh, that's awesome. That means the game can have seduction. That means that you can gamble. That means it's going to be all about fighting your own sense of loyalty. It means you're going to fall in love. It means all this kind of stuff. And you're just like, that's going to be awesome. And they're like, oh, no, you're going to drive a car around and blow shit up. And you're like, okay, well, but why can't you make a game about those other things? Like, oh, it just can't be done. Oh, that's stupid, And to me, that's not true at all. And so part of the exercise is to say, look, this idea of procedural adaptation is not just some weird academic thing that can't be applied to commercial games. So I try to take some commercial games and say, look, these are some games that really did it really well. And they did it sort of within the constraints of existing commercial genres. And it's not that it can't be done. It's that you have to be a little bit more creative about it.
So, and your audience is game developers then?
So for this book, it actually is somewhat of an academic audience for the book. So it's a little bit like if it was more of like a journalistic book, I would have struck a different tone for it. So I talk like quite a lot in it about, there's I don't know if there's a lot of jargon in there, but based on the tolerance for jargon I think you guys have, there's probably a lot.
So for the purposes of the case study, right, of this case study, because Tim, you wanted to compare how Matt and his academic role would look at it versus how we as critics would look at it. I can talk about my review of Resident Evil Code Veronica, and at the time when that came out on the Dreamcast, it was sort of, to me, a new level of graphics in terms of the detail and the realism. And yet at the same time, and when I was playing it, it was still stuck in all the usual gaming conventions of, there's a box in front of this door, so you therefore cannot get past this door because there's a box there. And
Sure.
that really kind of drove me up the wall. And then I ended up comparing that to artists in the early 19th century when they started employing photography into their artwork, and art got more and more realistic, and it got to the point where photography was becoming an art itself, and the artist needed to decide, there's no point in going more realistic anymore because we have photography now, so what are we going to do now? And that starts off abstract art and more symbolic art, and that whole trend or movement rather. And basically, I couch that in my review to say this is where game developers are at right now. They have all this realism, and they need to really start thinking about what that means and where they're going to go with it. So that's kind of how I looked at it as a critic.
Sure. Yeah. I mean that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
let me ask you this. Film criticism, we talked about this a little bit earlier, has, some of its own technical jargon that has made its way into like the popular discussion of films that like everybody understands now. And I like to think a lot of that is because of Pauline Kael and Ebert and Siskel primarily for being guys who understood film in a very technical way and then taking it and making it presentable to the masses. Now, I would say Henry Jenkins sort of fills that role for gaming. Do you think there's anybody else out there who's sort of, filling that same kind of role that's going to take this stuff and make it, where maybe not the lowest common denominator guys who buy, Madden 10 every year and that's the only game they buy understand it, but like, the people who play a lot of games can at least understand what's going on at this higher level?
One of the reasons I don't actually see academia as that insular is that I actually see academia, the people I know at least, and a lot of the people I'm aware of, is very connected to the games industry. Right. I mean, I wouldn't expect, Joe Average Gamer to get a lot out of a GDC talk either.
Right.
But I know people who are in academia who go to GDC all the time and they rub shoulders with and are friends with really important and influential game designers, and they're completely on the same page when they talk about a lot of this stuff. So, it's more like, I don't know. I mean, if Scorsese came and talked to, somebody off the street and was like, "Oh my God, the editing in that movie," and the guy was like, "Boring. What are you talking about?" I'd be like, at that point, I'd be like, that guy's an idiot, and Scorsese's not. I'd rather listen to him. So
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it depends. I mean, my definition of whether or not something's interesting or whether or not something is accessible is not necessary. And I know you said it doesn't have to be lowest common denominator, but I do think that, in a way, academia is not that insular if it is connected with this other community. And I don't actually see academia, frankly, that connected with sort of mainstream game culture that much at this point, but I do see it very connected with industry. And I think that there's quite a lot of people who are doing work that industry cares about, like Jesper Juhl, who's a friend of mine who just wrote a book called The Casual Revolution about the rise of casual games. He did studies where he interviewed people who play casual games all the time and got a lot of data that for him was just about observing, because he himself is a hardcore gamer, and he's like, oh my God, what are these people doing? This is weird. And he basically looked at those people and he came to a series of conclusions. And those conclusions have been things that have been very interesting to people in industry because that's something they really care about. So for example, not to be too jargon heavy. So an example of I really think you should look at this book. It's called The Casual Revolution. It just came out, but it's he actually has, you talk about casual games a lot, but very few people can actually define exactly what a casual game is. He has a very clear definition for what casual game actually is in the book, which is actually quite useful, I think, to players, useful to industry people as well. And one of the things, and he has like 4 or 5 things that actually make a casual game, and one of them, which I think is actually very telling, is some people think that casual games are games you don't play for a long amount of time or that you can't play for a long amount of time. And actually what he says, which I think is a very good observation, is that casual games have a low perceived time commitment, but not an actually low time commitment.
Well, I totally believe that.
Yeah, so because there are people who play Bejeweled for 5 hours a day.
Right.
So
I'm sitting next to one right now.
So to me, that's a useful academic observation. Like that's an academic book, but it's also a book that people who are not academics are reading and actually get stuff out of. And and the thing I just said about some of those definitions for casual, and I don't remember all of them, but the one about like low perceived time commitment, to me, that's not too jargon heavy to alienate people, I don't think.
Right.
In your world, Matt, speaking specifically again from your own perspective, do you see a value in making this gaming academia more accessible or more mainstream, or do you think it's reaching the audience you think it should, and there's nothing to really worry about right now?
I hope that academia can become more accessible to the mainstream, and when I say the mainstream, I mean sort of industry and players. And if you sort of include industry, because I actually see industry and players as being very much part of the same community. I see industry people as people just like you guys who are just like, I love games and now I'm going to make a game. And there's quite a lot of people. I mean, those aren't choices you guys have made, but the people who make games and work in game companies talk exactly like you guys do. Mm-hmm. So I see those in some ways as the same community. I see the people who actually made the leap into industry as people who are very serious about actually making these things and actually, and they're interested in learning how to do what they do better. And sometimes having tools and ways to think about games that helps them do that is really useful. So I hope as this moves forward, academia can serve that community better. And I do feel like some academics are doing a better job of that lately. For example, Ian Bogus, the guy I mentioned before, his first book was called Unit Operations, which is a book I've never read, and I can't imagine what it's about. But
I guess unit operations. Probably.
I guess so. But like for example, his second book was called Persuasive Games, where he basically talks about how games can make political arguments and stuff like that. And he was interviewed on the Colbert Report and stuff for that book. So, I mean, I do think that academics are beginning to reach this space where I think that they understand how to speak to an audience that maybe they can be more relevant to, and in a way that has more of an impact on the games industry, on the gaming public, and stuff like that. But there's always going to be insular people who are just in academia, who are just there by themselves, and really the reason they're there is because it's a cushy job. It's like, dude, I can just have a teaching job where I get to come around every day and just talk about shit I like in an impenetrable language that nobody understands but me, and I get to feel smarter than everybody else. And holy shit, people give me money for that. And then if I get tenure, there's no way they can stop me from doing that until I die.
Yeah.
So I mean,
it's like a license to print $100,000 a year.
It's an awesome job, and so you're always going to have people in academia who see academia that way, and it's not about necessarily helping other people understand. It's just about them having a job. And unfortunately, I do think that there's this idea in academia, and I don't know how conscious it is with some people, but it's like the more impenetrable academic language is, the more you ensure that academics continue to have jobs.
Yeah, and there you have just distilled everything that I was trying to say pretty much down into like one.
You never know which guy to fire. You can't tell them apart because you don't know what they're talking about. So you got to just keep them all on.
Well, I mean, it's also, but the thing is that if this stuff was actually easy to figure out, people would figure it out, and then the academic would be just like, oh, but now I need to tell you about blah for the 40th time, and they're like, no, I understood it. I understood it the first time, so you have nothing else to teach.
Nothing else to teach. Yes. So it was a short semester.
Exactly. So clarity is, so obscuring ideas that should be more simple is sort of one of the things that perpetuates, being in academia. And obviously there's lots of like masturbation and that whole idea of mental masturbation of just like, what the fuck are these people talking about? But there's regular masturbation too, in case you're wondering.
I think what Matt, I think you explained for me 50% of it as far as the people that you were just saying that why they keep these things obscure. That explains 50%. I think the other 50% to me now I understand is they're actually kind of just frauds. They're not actual academics practicing academics. Because I think one of the things I've taken away from this conversation is that the people who are practicing academics are too busy practicing it and not on message boards bitching about it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that some academics don't make it their business to try to reach outside academia, and some do. And I think occasionally there are some who don't reach out who I still find interesting, but in general, the people who try to reach out, I think, tend to be the people who are more interesting. And I'm certainly capable of finding something that's really jargon heavy interesting, but I also don't think, to me, that's not the only academic mode. And I think that if you sort of smack people over the head with that kind of academic mode and say, this is academia and you must like this or you're an idiot, people are going to say, fuck you. So I think that's fair, but really, I mean, to me, anything is trying to teach people about anything, or trying to help people understand anything, or trying to help yourself understand something is always about clarity and communication. I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, if it's not helping or not helping you understand something, I mean, there's no point in it.
Yeah. And I think that is a trait that both academics and critics share. And I think that's common ground that we can both stand on. Guys, I don't know where the time has gone. I just looked up at the clock, but we are just about out of time. I think we've proven that critics and academics can get along. We can love each other. There was no violence here tonight, and I was very glad to see that. Matt, I will give you the last word. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up here?
I'm actually quite capable of just bitching about games, in case you were wondering. So I can, ask me about a game I like or something like that. I can totally talk about a game and not mention terms like procedural adaptation.
Well, let's do this. Do you do a lot of bitching about games on a website, on Twitter, anything that you can plug that people can check out if they want to follow you?
Yeah, I wrote something for the Gambit blog about why the story for Bionic Commando is awesome.
Oh.
Maybe that's worse. Maybe that's worse than jargon, though.
That's like two things Tim's nuts about.
Right.
You're like his new favorite person.
Yeah, Brad and I were.
If you have an unnatural love for Tom Selleck, he might propose.
I don't, in fact. So just almost there, but not quite.
Oh,
This is
Two for-
Faith. Your spot is safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So much for my stalking tomorrow.
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, out of the blue. So, Matt Weiss, can't thank you enough for being on the show. You were fantastic.
Oh, no problem.
And do come back anytime. So, to wrap things up, as always, the best place to listen to our show is right off the GameCritics.com website. You can also subscribe through iTunes, Zune, or good old-fashioned RSS. If you do have feedback, leave a comment on the website or tweet us up. We are at GameCritics on Twitter. My thanks again to Matthew Weiss, as well as my colleagues and brothers, Chi-Kong Liu, Brad Gallaway, and Mike Bracken. My thanks also to you for listening. Happy Thanksgiving, folks. Until next time, I'm Tim Spaeth. Good night, and bon chance.